Steve Lobel is an independent entrepreneurship consultant who has more than 40 years of experience as a serial entrepreneur. He's also worked in management consulting and as an executive coach. Steve published his memoir, Failing My Way to Success, in 2015 as a way to share his experience turning defeat into triumph. So Steve, we are very fortunate to have you here today.
Thank you. It's nice to be here and welcome everybody. We have a lot to talk about, so I'm going to spend the first few minutes just telling you from my personal perspective a little bit of my history. It's divided up essentially in decades. So I have 5 decades of experience that is going to be a bit of a challenge to talk about in 1 hour, but I'm going to depend on a lot of questions from our audience and happy to answer anything I can. So starting out with the 70s, I went to school at UAlbany, graduated with a degree in English in 1970, and set off to go to law school, from which I flunked out after the first year. I then took a job as a clerk in a camera store because I had a love for photography, and ended up working for that company for 9 years and helped opening a number of 5 retail stores. In the 80s, I had enough working for other people and set out in my first entrepreneurial venture, knowing nothing about what I was doing, but I managed to open and grow 3 different iterations of a gourmet food store, starting with a cheese shop, going to a cheese shop with prepared food, and then going into a major shop like Whole Foods. In order to fund that, I sought out investors, and I found an angel investor, and through his money and my expertise, we built a company called Cowan Lobel, which became a landmark business, and that was in the 80s. The relationship really went south because of missed assumptions, and we'll talk about that in my presentation. So I was forced out of my own business in the 90s and purchased, out of the desire to own a business, I made a terrible mistake and bought a company that I didn't know how to run. So it took me 20 months to lose 20 years of accumulated wealth. And I'm reading this just to get through it quickly for you. So I found myself totally bankrupt, and in the early 90s, and approached Pat Swigert, the president of UAlbany, and invented a job for myself as its first director of marketing. Spent 4 wonderful years at the university, became director of alumni affairs between 93 and 97. So if some of you were either students or alumni from that period, I was there with you at the university. In 15, I published my memoir. In 18, I was diagnosed with cancer. And in 2020, I retired from my day job in the insurance business. Interestingly about the insurance business was that I hated it. I was in a position where I emotionally was compelled to own a business. When I went into the insurance business, that was a change for me because I ended up as an employee and a total neophyte. I thought hard about how I was going to manage and be successful at that business. And when I looked around, I saw emerging technology as the future. And so I went after that. And that was really the key to my long-term success. Along the way, I also served on multiple boards of directors, and I'll talk a little bit about service to the community as a means of giving back if you're successful in business. So with that said, I'd like to go to the slides now, if we can, Melissa. Thank you. So those of you who are interested in the details of this story can access my memoir on Amazon. Let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, my trials, errors, failures, and successes. Why do I do this? Why do I talk about my failures? Well, I talk about my failures because I never learned anything from my successes. But I can tell you this, I learned many, many, many things, some of which I'll touch upon during this slide presentation. But it's, I learned more from what I did wrong than what I did right. Now I use that knowledge and experience to mentor young entrepreneurs and hopefully to mitigate some of the mistakes that I made. So we call this 10 principles. I hope you don't hold me to the 10, but we'll talk about the methodologies and what I've learned along the way. And then I would encourage you to ask some questions. I'll be happy to deal with that. Next slide, please. Okay, first and foremost, know thyself. What do I mean by that? You really need, if you're an entrepreneur, to recognize what role you are going to play as an entrepreneur. First and foremost, what do you do best? What are your core skill sets? Next, what are your deepest desires? When you wake up in the morning, what floats your boat? What makes you feel good about the world, about yourself? And how does your work experience relate to that? Next, be real about yourself. Understand and identify what you do well, what you don't do well, and then figure out how to incorporate that as you contemplate the idea of becoming an entrepreneur. I feel and would like to say that you can be entrepreneurial in whatever you do. Being an entrepreneur does not require you to create or own a business, but entrepreneurial thought can be used whether you're in a for-profit business, a not-for-profit organization, whatever you do in life, entrepreneurial thought can help you manage through your life. And there's many ways in which to do that. I have a good friend who's a rabbi who is one of the most entrepreneurial spirits I know. So it really covers all walks of life. Let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, important. You can't do everything yourself. One of the earliest mistakes I made in my food business before we became successful was I tried to do everything myself. The only problem was I didn't know how to cook. So it became very clear from the early onset that I needed to find people with skills that I didn't have. It's all about team building. that was probably my most important lesson. As I opened this business, the first people that I brought in to work with me were my family, my sister, my wife. Ultimately, I realized that I had to hire professionals who had the skills and experience that I didn't have. And then I had to develop a coach mentality, which is not so easy to do. And many of you might be coaches in your own worlds, but you really have a coach. To me, brings out the best in the people that they're associated with and that they work with. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, this is a subject very close to the heart. Entrepreneurship, owning a business, is not it's not a job as such. It's a lifestyle, and that's important to remember, because a business is a living and breathing entity. It really does develop a life of its own. Once you make a move to start a business, which is really what entrepreneurs do. In fact, I want to read you a little quote about entrepreneurship. And this comes from a working definition by Thomas Eisman. The history of the word entrepreneurship is fascinating, and scholars have indeed parsed its meaning. I'll spare you the results and focus instead on the definitions we used at Harvard Business School. It was formulated by Professor Howard Stevenson, the godfather of entrepreneurship studies at Harvard Business School. And according to Stevenson, entrepreneurship is the pursuit of opportunity beyond resources that you control. So what does that mean? Well, when I started my first business, I didn't have any money. So I had to borrow from friends and family in order to fund the business. It's a pursuit of an idea. I had the idea for a cheese shop because as I looked around the community, I found that there was no place to buy quality cheese outside of a supermarket, and there was two cheeses to offer, and that was cheddar and Jarlsberg. But what I saw in a larger market in New York City when I traveled there to learn about this whole industry was lots and lots of opportunity. But again, once I gave birth to that company, things started moving that were not always in my control. I encourage you to be patient with yourself, because the last thing you want to do is burn yourself out, and try and incorporate a little fun as you go, which took me a while to get to, because I had to develop some confidence in the business that we opened. But I surrounded myself with food people and was able to hire a high quality chef for my little takeout business. And one thing led to another. And we went on to a very successful catering business and a very large store. Sales went from $125,000 in my first year to $3.5 million before I was thrown out of my own business. And I can answer questions about that if you have them. Let's go on to the next slide, please. Lots of twists and turns. Every time I went down one path, I found that I had an obstacle, whether it was hiring enough people or where do I get the next business loan. What I did was I really got, as my daughter would say, get into the zen of it. I embraced the changes. Persistence is key for survival. Above all odds, I think the thing I did the most effectively was I was persistent. I didn't let failure define me. You've got to realize there's very rarely a straight line to success. I don't know of any business person who hasn't had to make changes along the way. And we're going to talk about that in a second. So let's go to the next slide, please. Okay. Go with the flow. Nobody can predict the future. So the thing that I would tell you to think about is, what direction do you want to take your life in? What do you want your days to look like? Who do you want to hang out with? Who do you want to talk to? What really motivates you going forward? Don't be married to your assumptions. Let me talk about that. When I got an angel investor to invest in my food company, I assumed that he was already a successful businessman, a multimillionaire, and he actually came after me because he found out that I was planning to enlarge my food store in the same shopping center, and we had a very good idea. He heard about it through a mutual friend who happened to be our mutual accountant. He decided he wanted to be in my business and came after me, offering me all kinds of money. I did not know at that time very much about money. Again, I had a bootstrap company. I was in and out of trouble with the IRS for not paying my payroll taxes. I made just about every mistake you can in the book. And along comes this guy and waving an empty checkbook and asking me, I turned down multiple requests for a lunch, finally agreed to meet with him. And he said, well, how much money do you need? And I wasn't prepared for that. And I said, okay, $2 million. Well, we went through all this and he said yes to every dollar amount. I assumed that he was going to cover the business end of things. And he assumed that I was going to cover the business end. And we never talked about it. He wanted to be me. I was the marketing and merchandising person, and I was quite good at that. I thought he would just be the money guy. So learn to pivot. First, let me talk to you about a lesson I learned from Tom Whalen, former mayor of Albany. He always told me assumptions are the mother of all screw-ups. And he was a little more graphic in that. I just assumed that this guy had all the money in the world and it would last forever, and he would just let me use it. And he would let me be the marketer and the merchandiser. And he would run the books and make sure we were profitable. Not so. Let's go to the next slide. Reframe failure. So two things happened to me. I got thrown out of my business and I was hungry to own another business. I could have gotten a job in the food industry and probably been quite successful, but I did not define myself any longer as an employee. I was an entrepreneur, I was a business owner, and I needed to do that again in the worst way. So I set about to buy a business, and I did. And the short story is I bought a screen printing business in Saratoga along with a friend. We knew nothing about the business. It appeared to be successful, but I was very short on my due diligence because I was emotionally involved in wanting to own this business. And so we ignored the advice of others, and we went into debt to buy a business, thinking arrogantly and wrongly that if I could create Cowan Lobel, that was a big success, I could fix anything. So I bought this company, and the bottom line is it took us 20 months to lose 20 years of accumulated wealth. And I was devastated. That was just absolutely the lowest of the low points of my life. I happened to go to a self-help seminar by Zig Ziglar, and he said something that has carried me through my life, because indeed I had failed miserably. But Zig said, failure is an event, it's not a person. Well, that simple sentence, and I encourage you to think carefully about your position in life and who you know and who you admire, and how does that all relate to you and your ultimate success. And there are steps. You got to learn, you got to train, you got to take instruction. And more than anything, you got to practice, 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 practice. Let's go to the next slide, please. Actually care. How many people do you know that really actually care and show it? But in my experience over the last 50 years, I've been very fortunate to cultivate many friendships. Now, how do you cultivate friendships? Well, in order to have a friend, you got to be a friend, and you need to practice that. You got to be a reliable person. And I'll tell you a little bit about that when I talked about my insurance career. Be there for others. You always want to be aware of how can you be helpful to others. And let me say, one of the most important things about getting to know people and establishing yourself in the world is through networking. Network, network, network. I can't say it enough. And so how do you network? Well, if you think about the field that you wish to be in and where people go that are in that particular field, look for events where people attend that you want to know and get to know them. Quick story about when I was when I went into the insurance business. Also, I didn't know anything about that. I had to get some formal education. I had to get licenses. I decided that for the first several years of my career in the insurance business, that I was going to do nothing but listen. Now, I was already out there in the world. I was in my 40s or 50s, and I had already had a lot of experience. And I thought everybody knew me, and I knew a lot of people. When I started going to events like Center for Economic Growth and Chamber of Commerce events, I really was very hungry to get some sales as an insurance salesman. So I always led with my business card. And the first question I asked people was, who does your insurance? And can I have a look at it? Well, there's not a faster way to chase somebody away than to look at them and ask them about insurance and ask for an insurance sale. So I decided over time, and having people walk away from me, right, mid-sentence practically, is that I had to be more interesting. And so this picture of three boys reminded me of travels I made to Nicaragua, to the third world, doing humanitarian work. And this was right in the middle of learning this new career in insurance. But I did it anyway. And I went as a photojournalist, and I created slideshows, and I did presentations about what I found. And lo and behold, you might be asking, well, what the heck does that have to do with insurance? Well, it doesn't. It has to do with people. And what does it have to do with people? Well, people like to listen to other people who have done things interesting. So I decided that when they asked me what I do, I would talk to them about all the volunteer work that I was doing and some interesting travels doing the same. And lo and behold, we struck up conversations that eventually led to a relationship, that eventually led to the point where I was in a position to talk to somebody about how I made a living. Let's go to the next slide. Okay. Listen and learn. Listening, to my mind, is the best thing that you can do. It's the best part of a conversationalist is listening. Okay, because everyone has a experience to share with you. People like to talk about themselves. And I found over time, and I'm not the first one to talk about this, but the most effective salespeople are the best listeners. You want to give people permission to tell you about themselves. And ultimately, I became a problem solver. I became a source of referrals to others, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But I decided that no, I'm not a salesman of insurance. I'm a resource to help people solve problems with their businesses that they can't otherwise solve without a professional. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, referrals. Referrals are the lifeblood of sales. I can't say it any simpler. The thing to remember is, in order to obtain referrals, and you know, think about it, a referral is having a third person who knows you and works with you refer you to another person who needs that same set of services. Coming from a third party who does not have skin in the game, that gives confidence to the people, to the person who's referring you, so that you eliminate any hesitation, at least to talk to you. So first and foremost, provide referrals wherever you can. And I always love to get a call. Can you introduce me? One of my best clients, I remember, the first thing I helped him with was finding used furniture for his first office. This person went on to found a company that ultimately sold for $1 billion. So referrals, provide them and seek them out. Your network is going to be your greatest asset. So everywhere I went, I collected business cards. I found out a little bit about the history of people so that I could create a comfort level of working with me as opposed to someone who might be my by competition. Let's go to the next slide, please. Okay. Probably the most slide I could present to you. Family is key, and to keep this personal, this is my family from last year, one of our Cape vacations. And remember this, nobody loves you as unconditionally as your family. One of the big questions you always ask yourself as an entrepreneur, when you look in the mirror in the morning, is, why am I doing this? Because I could tell you that there's a lot of pain involved, but there's also a lot of joy involved. But ultimately, you've got to answer this question: why am I doing this? How is it relevant to me? And how can I help it make me a better person and do good work in the world and give back? I can't speak enough about giving back. I think I've been privileged to enjoy some success in the world, ultimately, through a lot of fits and starts. I've done a lot of volunteering in my time and a lot of philanthropy. And the best things that have happened in my life for me have been based on giving back to the community and trying to make the world a little bit better from my perspective. So with that, I think I'd like to start with some questions and then see where that takes us.
Okay, great. Well, a lot of great information in there to kind of give some more thought to. But in the meantime, we do have a few questions that folks have posted in the chat. So first question from an anonymous attendee: what new patterns or behaviors have you seen in society that might be important to an entrepreneur today?
Well, first of all, I commend you for asking that question, because it's all about understanding the world we live in. Things are changing so fast these days. It's difficult to answer. I think the greatest thing is to be aware of the environment. You've got to stay up with current events, and you've got to do it from the perspective of understand your place in the world. Okay, where do you fit in, and how can you move the bar? How can you change things? Repeat that question one more time. I don't know that I fully answered it.
What new patterns or behaviors have you seen in society that might be important to an entrepreneur?
Oh, okay. People are retreating to their homes. Okay. People are really spending more time with their families. They're doing a lot of stuff that, when I see young business people, when I see my children who have children and how they go about considering what's important in their lives, I think it's changed for the better in many ways because they are paying attention to their families. They look at quality of life issues. They try and, I think people should be looking for more of a balance in life. So the other thing is communication is changing so rapidly. I mean, look at this. Here, there's probably 60 or so of you out there, and I'm sitting at home speaking to you and communicating to you and reaching out, and we're having a conversation. This is all new stuff. Stay aware, because I think the one thing that is certain is change.
So true. Okay. Here's a question from Linda Gallagher. In addition to the seminar from Zig Ziglar, what helped you overcome some of the setbacks you experienced?
I think first and foremost, my wife and my family. They always reminded me what was important. When I was crashing and burning, nobody ever said, my wife never said, well, I told you so, and you jerk, why'd you? I literally one day was padlocked out of a business and forced into bankruptcy. And for me, it was a real bankruptcy. I lost everything. Wow. And the only reason we did not lose our home, I mean, I was on the verge of homelessness, literally, absolutely literally. I had 2 kids in private college. I had 3 mortgages on my house and no money and no job. And I had to recover from that. So I just picked myself up by my bootstraps, and I looked to friends and family for support. And I was always honest with myself and others once I figured out how important that was to be. Did that answer the question?
Despite the situation you just described, which I think would have discouraged a lot of us from trying it again, it didn't discourage you. You are a serial entrepreneur. You went back and gave it your all again. So what made you think I'm still going to try some of these new ventures instead of taking a safer path?
I have a passion for independence in my thinking, in my lifestyle. I really want to be the boss of me, as one of my grandchildren would say. I'm having trouble describe. I can only say an entrepreneur is a way of life. It's just not a job. It's a way of being. And it's a way of embracing the unknown. It's a way of trusting in yourself to take a chance. I think, did we talk about pivot? Pivot is probably one of the, when you're heading in one direction. So let me put it in real terms. I started out in my food business with a cheese shop, in a tiny little shop, imported cheese in downtown Albany. Within a year, I realized I was in the wrong place and I couldn't make a living just selling cheese. So in my next iteration, I moved in 1 year to a bigger store in a shopping center. And I added a kitchen, and I looked around and I realized that everybody was going back to the workplace, men and women alike, and somebody needed to feed the families. So I built the kitchen to feed the families of people who were out there in the workforce and wanted homemade food. And that really took hold. So opened the Chiefs Connection in 81. By 1988, we were doing $1 million in sales. Along came Cowan. We built a much bigger place, and we hit $3.5 million in sales within 2 years. And then he threw me out of the business. So I can't, and then over 10 years, he trashed the business.
It must have been hard to watch.
That was
But
difficult to watch.
yeah.
And shoulda, woulda, coulda, but I did it. And to add insult to injury, bought a company and lost all my money. The saving grace was people. The insurance agency I joined was owned by my friend and mentor for 30 years. And he opened up an opportunity for me in his agency. We both thought, because I knew so many people, I would instantly have business. But I didn't know the business well enough to know how to sell it. So it took me several years of education and practice, and then realized I was going after the wrong people. I was going after people in food business. Well, there was already some other agent there who had earned his right to do that. I found emerging technology and nobody was doing it. And even the insurance business, it was new. So I learned about that. And over probably the next 15 years, I went to all the seminars and met all the tech people. And I became the insurer to the emerging tech people and the entrepreneurial community. And that's what got me here today.
Yeah.
And then I
Found
became
a niche. Right?
well, it enabled me to become an angel investor. So I now invest through Eastern New York Angels in startup companies. And
All right,
I
we
always
have a
bet
few
on
more.
people.
We have a few more questions, Steve.
Let's go.
Octavia would like to know, what advice do you have for folks with multiple interests in a few different whys as they build out more than one business, especially when you are your brand?
Well, first of all, good thing to recognize that you are a brand and you are a business that you can build regardless of what else you're doing. You're always building your brand. So I finally decided my brand is Stephen Lobel, and therefore my website, Stephen E. Lobel. My brand is me. But in terms of other companies, what makes you happy? It's a simple question, but hard to answer. What do you feel good doing, and pursue that? What are you good at? What are your core skills? How are you a writer? Are you good at math? Are you a good manager? Not everybody is all of those things, but you got to surround yourself by people and create a team that supplements your skill set and are coachable and can walk to the beat of your drum. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. Okay. Here's another question from Mohamedou. Would you recommend working to have some experience before becoming an entrepreneur or starting straightforward?
Yes, I think it pays to spend some time in the business world after graduating school. First of all, I'm a strong believer in doing your undergrad and then getting out in the world and getting some work experience. Learn how to become part of a team. Learn how to be helpful within the company you work for. Become an asset. Figure out what is important to this company for it to succeed, and use your skills to help it succeed. But keeping in mind and looking for opportunities of ways that you can ultimately create your own business and ultimately call the shots. But remember, just because you're an entrepreneur doesn't mean you're in charge of everything. You've got multiple bosses. You've got the government, you've got your employees, you've got a landlord. There are many aspects of a business that are not necessarily under your direct control. So as an entrepreneur, you got to navigate.
Good point. All right, we have a couple more questions, but we also have a comment from one of our alums who said, I just want to thank you for speaking so candidly about failure. I agree it's one of the best learning experiences one can have, but it's so underrated and often has a stigma attached to it. It's refreshing to hear your story, and I appreciate the opportunity to learn from your truths. I also want to say I was a regular shopper at Cowan Lobel, and I still miss it. It was a wonderful place.
Thank
I
you.
have to say I shopped there as well, so I will second that. So just wanted to share that with you.
I so much appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, it's pretty special. Another one of our alums asks, how do you go about establishing a culture in your business?
The culture comes from you. It's how do you comport yourself on a daily basis? Are you an honest broker? Are you, how do you go about your daily business? Do you follow the rules? Do you break the rules when you have to? You really got to lead by example. The culture is really you, that comes from within. As a coach, you can encourage a positive behavior that enhances the culture and make it fun. You know, business, I'm a big believer in having fun. You can't be so serious that every day, you know, when I was younger, aside from being arrogant, which I definitely was, I wore my heart on my sleeve some days. I would, if I was having a bad day in my store, everybody was having a bad day. And so they used to joke about that. You know, if I sneezed, everybody had a cold. You know, it just the way you comport yourself on a daily basis has tremendous influence over those around you and those who work for you, because, you know, they look up to you. So you got to do the right thing. I think that's those, remember those words, always do the right thing by yourself and for others.
Here's a question from Jody. My business is international. Do you feel it's important to travel to the countries where I'm in closest contact with those who are aligned with my company and my interests so that I can connect with my associates in person?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Business is all about relationships. There's no better way to form a relationship than to be face to face with somebody where you can speak about all kinds of things. You know, it's not all business. It's like it's living. It's living. What are we doing here? Why are we doing this? So by all means, whatever you can do to go to where your clients are and meet them face to face, exchange ideas, exchange a meal. There's a lot that can be done over a good meal, a lot of business.
A lot of business. Yep.
Yeah.
So true.
Yeah. Food drives a lot. That was,
in a lot of
I
ways.
always thought, you know, when I was looking for something to do, what does everybody need? What does everybody need? Well, aside from good cheese, they need food. You know, and good food makes people smile and happy.
Yep. So True. Here's a question from Howard. For people such as myself who own small businesses that can use the latest technology to grow, where are the best places to go locally to network and get guidance about computer science technology, such as predictive modeling and artificial intelligence?
Okay, there's a lot going on in that area through the Center for Economic Growth. There's Albany County Code if you want to learn how to do that technology. And let me say this, it's good, even if you're an entrepreneur, to learn some basic skills, okay? So my example, and there was no technology in the days when I was doing the business. We didn't even have a website, if you can imagine. But what was I going to say? Oh, yeah. We made our living on making food. Making food is hard to do and make money at. So what I should have done is I should have taken a year off when I could during the transition to Cowan and Lobel and gone to the Culinary Institute to learn kitchen management. Because had I done that, I might have sacrificed a number of months, but the company would have gone on without me. I would have come back armed with the skills that really resulted in my getting thrown out of my own business. So now around here, there's more going on than I know about. And I would suggest start with the Chamber of Commerce, start with the Center for Economic Growth. Ask other companies what's going on. This is where relationships come up. Go to as many events as you can find. Things are a little convoluted now because there's a lot of virtual meetings that are not quite the same as going to, if you can go in a position to go to something live, a live meeting, as soon as possible, try to do that. I'm not sure if I answered that question as well as I could have.
Well, I think you certainly provided some options. The university also has a center for entrepreneurship, which is very much tied into the entrepreneurship community. So if someone wanted to reach out to me directly, I can get you the name of the person who manages that program. And I'm sure that would also be a very helpful connection.
Yeah, let me add, you have graduated from probably one of your best assets. The University at Albany, for me, was useful twice. I had two wonderful stints at the university, one as an undergraduate and one as an employee. And I can't say enough for the education that I received, but twice, once as a student and one as and the other as an administrator. It's just a wonderful place.
You bring up a good point, Steve, is that the university and its alumni can be a wonderful resource for you.
Yes.
We have a program the Alumni Association runs called UCAN, which is the Albany Career Advisory Network. And it is a network of about 2,000 alums who specifically said they're interested in talking to other alums and students about careers and providing advice and insights and networking. And that's available to alums. And I know we've got some serial entrepreneurs that are part of that program as mentors. Yeah. So, another great resource and another way to expand your network is to use a program like that. And I would be happy. In fact, I'll send a follow-up email probably tomorrow or early next week to all of you, and I'll include the link to that site if folks are interested. And Howard, who just asked that last question, also wanted to say, I'm a volunteer fighter in McCownville, and Cowan and Lobel was always a great supporter. So thank you for that and your philanthropy. So
That's wonderful. And I'm available also as a resource through Melissa any way that you need me, because I'm really blessed to be in this position, to have the time to do this type of presentation and follow a new career as a turner of wooden bowls, believe it or not. I'll leave that for another discussion.
You're always trying something new. Well, I think that that about wraps it up for us. I think on a great note, I will follow up. I will also share Steve's email. He's said that I may do that. So if folks want to reach out to him directly with some questions that maybe we didn't get to today or you think of later, we can do that. So Steve, thank you so much for sharing with us. I know there was a lot to pack into an hour. But
it was a lot. I hope I made sense.
Made a good dent. You made a good dent in it. Hopefully gave some folks some good tips, some food for thought. Thank you very much for sharing this time with us, and I hope you all have a great afternoon.
Be well.